Hello and welcome back to the It's In You podcast. So today we're diving into a really important topic, which is kids' body image. It is something I'm really passionate about, and I want us parents and caregivers to understand that even without realizing it, we can have a huge influence on how our kids see and feel about their bodies. Now, this isn't about placing any blame at all. It's about awareness and how once that we're aware, we can shift how we show up a little bit, and that can make the world of difference to our children. So this is something that I'm really, really passionate about. And being a trainer for the last 15 years, I have trained hundreds and hundreds of men and women. And I have seen lots of people with varied body image issues. And unfortunately, you're more likely to come across people that have more of a negative body image issue, more negative view of their body than positive. And being a trainer, I did this, used to run these challenges quite often. And I did a challenge, there was probably about 30 or so people in this challenge. And this was probably the thing that broke my heart the most. And it just drove me more to see how can I make a change? How can I try to change just this small little world of people that I'm in contact with, and we ran this challenge, and you met with everybody one-on-one. So I met with all these people one-on-one, and every one that I met with, except for one, they had something that they wanted to change or that they hated about their bodies. And, it was only this one person that said, I love my body. Everyone else, had something critical to say or wanted to change, or that was the kind of the main driver that they were there for. And it shocked me, and it made me really sad that this many people really hated their bodies. That as adults, they were feeling this way, but they had felt this way since they were a child or a teenager. And, they're stopping their lives from doing certain things because of how they felt about their bodies. And that's what breaks my heart the most. I hear stories of mums not being in photos. They don't want to be in the photographs because they feel like they don't look good enough. I hear stories of mums, not getting in bathers or sitting on the beach and not joining in with their kids because they don't want to be in photos. You hear of people not wanting to go out or do things with their partners because they don't like how they look or they don't feel comfortable. It's really sad of how we view about our bodies, how that can stop us from living our lives. So let's talk about why this matters. So I'm focusing on your children here and why it matters for them. But statistically, children as young as 3 years old can begin to show signs of body image concerns. And that's really alarming. By the age of 6, more than half of the girls say they worry about being too fat. And by the age of 10, up to 80% of girls have already been on a diet. And this breaks my heart. But the thing is, I want us to understand that your kids are watching and they are listening and they are absorbing more than what we think. Now, I've got 2 kids. So I have a 7-year-old and a 7-year-old daughter and a 11-year-old boy. And I'm really conscious of this because it's something that is around our house all the time. Exercise is a huge part of our lives. But I have a studio in my house, so people are in and out exercising. I have constantly spread the message of that people are exercising to be strong. I don't want to talk about weight or any of those. Try not to talk about any of those things. I understand that they hear conversations and me talking to people, whether I'm talking online or whether, we're talking in the studio, they might come in and out. And it's something I've been really, really conscious of since I've had my kids. And I talk about the benefits of exercise and why we're exercising, and that, I very I very rarely use the terms of weight and wanting to be thinner and all of that. But it's amazing. I'm really conscious of it, but it is amazing still how I've noticed things in my kids and how they feel. So my daughter was about three or so. I was doing an exercise class in the park, and we were getting into the car. And now I don't use the words like fat or any of those things. She wasn't at school, so she wouldn't be picking up those things, from other kids. But we were packing up and we were getting into the car, and there was a boy standing there, and he was probably late teens, and he was standing there, and he was a really solid kid. Now, he wasn't fat, he was solid. He was really solid. He was tall and he was solid. And Charlie pointed at him, and she's like, look at that fat man, and I was shocked that this even came out of her mouth, because I was like, where did you even hear that from? And I said to her, he looks really strong. And I was just shocked because, where did she even get that from? Because he wasn't fat. He was really solid. And she was 3. So the first, and, I'm given some statistics of girls, but it's just as much in boys as it is for females. And I think that people tend to, they tend to worry more about girls because it's more relevant, or it seems to be more females have it. But please don't underestimate your boys. So my son, he was about 7, and and we were doing nippers, and he was doing nippers, and we'd finished nippers, and he was talking to a friend that was talking to a little mate that he'd met that day, and so they were taking off their little rash vest thing that you wear. So they were taking that off, and they took that off, didn't think anything. And I watched Cooper, and he looked, now this boy just had, he had a low, he just had a low body fat percentage. So he was only a kid. So he had a very visible 6-pack. And Cooper looked at this boy's tummy. He looked at his tummy, and he looked up, and he looked it down, and then he looked back at his tummy, who didn't have a visible 6-pack, still not anywhere overweight, looked up and down at his tummy. And he did it about 3 times, looked back at the boy, and then looked back at himself, and he looked up. He looked himself up and down. He looked the boy up and down. He goes, you've got a 6-pack, and he became, was becoming really a bit obsessed with the 6-pack. And I think the kids at school were talking about it all this. And it broke my heart, because I'm like, he's only 7. And look at how he's looking up and down at his stomach and thinking that he's not good enough. After that, I, because he was talking a lot about having a 6-pack, and I got images of the body, and I showed him how everybody has a 6-pack and how it's really important to have a layer of fat over the 6-pack, and why that's important for our bodies. And I have heard him now, he's now 11, and I have heard him tell other people that story. So, I did address it straight away, but, it's just, this is just a few little things that I've noticed with my kids, and, why it is important to, I didn't want him thinking that, and it was so sad watching him look at his body. And I was thinking of all these women that I've trained and thinking, oh my God, I do not want this for my kids. I don't want them to feel that way. And with looking at what social media is like and the other influences all around, the last thing I want is them to not like their bodies. My daughter, I think she was 5 or 6. And again, it shocked me. She said to me one day, Mum, I hate my face. And I was like, what? And she says, I hate the dots on my face. So somebody at school had commented on her freckles on her face. And from then on, she became quite, and I was like, oh my God, you are so young, and I thought, I very rarely wear makeup. I I have fake eyelashes, but I do that because I don't wear makeup and I feel like I look, but I don't really talk about that stuff. I'm not great with having a facial routine or anything like that. But I was just so shocked that she said she hated her freckles. And she's now just turned 7. And we have spoke about this a lot. We've spoken about it on and off, trying to not make it a big deal, but, we have spoke about it. And I was, showing her that I have freckles and, showing her that other people have freckles. And I was surprised. I showed her a photo and she was like, she zoomed in like this. Look, there's not as much as me, and we were away on holidays and we were on a cruise, and on one of the toilets in the cruise, there was this lady, and she was beautiful, and she had all these, really visible freckles, and in the photo, they'd really made the freckles stand out. And I went and got her, and I said, "Come to the toilet." And I was like, "Look how beautiful this lady looks, and look at her face, and look at all her freckles." We worked at, calling them sun kisses and those things. And then a couple of months later, we were on the same cruise again. We were on the same cruise ship, and, we went into the same toilet. And again, it had been months, so I'd kind of forgotten, it wasn't on the front of my mind. And Charlie said to me, "Look how beautiful that lady is." So I was like, yes, but I was shocked, and it was sad that this period of time she was saying she hated herself, and I wanted to get on top of it because I didn't want this to start from such a young age, so it is important, and it's not something to dismiss in your kids. And I don't know if I've got it right. My kids are still young, and I can only hope that by the way that I speak, and that I can be, and give them a good and positive body image. So what is body image? Well, it is how we see, think, and feel about our bodies. It can be shaped by many things, media, peers, school, but home is kind of the first classroom, and we are their teachers. So, and we can have such an influence over, whether something sticks or something comes in and out. So let's talk about how we can actually influence our kids, and without even realizing it. And I think so many people say things without even knowing that they're saying that. So it's not those big one-on-one talks when we talk about our bodies, or talk about if they're going into puberty or any of those things. And it's not those kind of one-on-one talks, but it's the tiny everyday moments that influence more than what you realize. So it can be things when you're looking in the mirror and you're saying things like, "Oh my God, I look so bloated." When you are maybe having a bad clothes day and you are trying on different clothes, and you might say, "Oh, I feel really fat in this." It could be if we joke about needing to work off our food, or "Oh, I need to go, I've eaten all this junk food, now I need to work it off." And if it could be praising people for losing weight, and or being thin, and then talk ourselves about losing weight. And even if you don't say anything directly to your kids, they will pick up on your energy and your body language. There was a study that found that kids who parents often talked about dieting, they were more likely to diet themselves. So a 2002 study found that girls whose mothers were frequently on diets were more likely to be overly concerned with their weight, even at a young age. According to a study in the Body Image Journal, parental fat talk, so talk like "I feel so fat today," was directly linked to children's lower body satisfaction, especially in girls. Research shows that parents who focus on health, strength, and well-being instead of weight or appearance, their kids reported high levels of body satisfaction and self-esteem. So talking about physical activity for enjoyment, not burning calories, can lead to more positive long-term habits. It's very influential, even when you don't mean it. So saying words like, I feel fat, our kids pick up on that, and then they model what you do. So what's the things that our kids need to hear? So they need to hear things like our bodies come in all shapes and sizes. They want to hear things that their body, their value doesn't come from how they look, but who they are. They need to see that food isn't good or bad, and it's okay to enjoy it. And we want to talk about what our bodies can do, not how your bodies look. So you could be saying things like, I feel really strong today, and my body helps me do things I love. I love that I can run, lift, dance, and walk. It's amazing. So that's the talk that we need to get. And it's not easy to, when you've been brought up a certain way. And I want you to think on your own beliefs and where some of this may come from. So I as you said, I've trained many people over my years, and the thing that I guess shocked me when I first started, and I didn't realize it, was how we were brought up. So I was brought up in a household where diets didn't really exist. Food wasn't spoken about as good or bad. I only ever remember my mum being on a diet once. And I remember that she still left in room to have her wine because that's what she enjoyed. I only ever remember my mum being on that once. The other time I remember was my dad had cancer and they changed the food for his health. So that is the only time that stuff was in my household. And I didn't realize how lucky I was. So I never, have not really dieted myself. I have changed my food to, after babies, but I have not spent years and years dieting. That just was not on the card to me. It wasn't in my, but I come across women, that as young as 7 or 8, and they talk about how they had their families sitting around the tables, their aunts and their mums discussing what diet they could put them on next, and it's sad. And when people start at that young age, you are setting them up for a lifetime of starting this yo-yo dieting cycle. When, and if you think about yourself, like what were the type of messages that you got growing up? So how was food? How was all of that stuff spoken to you or around you when you were growing up? There's always like little aunties or things that make comments. So Cooper now, he's 11. He he has a solid build, and lots of people make lots of comments about his build, and it makes me cringe every time because I think the poor kid has enough stuff to deal with. And I know people don't mean any harm by it, but he has been called names at school. So he has been called fat, and we've had to really work hard on talking about his body and what his body can do. And the saddest thing is that we've had to work on, and we're still working on it, is getting to the underlying beliefs. So the saddest thing is that these kids were calling him fat, and they kept calling him fat, and he actually thinks he's fat, and that's when it can lead to disordered eating and all of those things. And that's not what we want. And any type of kids that have don't have the exact statistics in front of me, but any kids that are on the spectrum in any way are more have a higher chance of having an eating disorder. And the psychologist warned us of this. And when Cooper was going through and the kids were kind of calling in names, and we had to talk about how boys, so in boys, they actually need to have fat on them to grow tall. So if they're really thin and they don't have that fat on them, they can't get to their full potential of height that they're meant to be. And so that's something that we talked about, is that you need to have this little bit. And he's a solid, and he's strong. Like, I try to explain to him how, kids his age, because he's always been around exercise, kids his age can't do some of the things that he can. Even adults can't do some of the things that he can, because he's really strong, and that's his superpower. And so in the last year, probably the last 6 months or so, he's probably, his view on himself and his view in that way has quite changed. But we have been working hard on it. And again, I was really grateful to notice this, and was grateful that we have support from a psychologist and all of that to talk this stuff through. But I just don't want this for any kids. And I just think it's really important to start reflecting on how we were brought up and how it became normal for us, but this does not have to be normal for our kids. So, lots of people, lots of us have been brought up in a diet culture. So I was brought up, I'm 42 now, so I was brought up in the 90s. So it was all that very stick thin model type person. That was the kind of look that was in. And girl, we were all taught to be smaller and quieter and more disciplined, and we get praised for weight loss and told to watch what we eat. So it makes sense that you carry those beliefs into adulthood. But we now get the chance to break the cycle. And when we can start to understand how it felt for us, and how that stuff sets you on a trajectory, and how of yo-yo dieting, and not feeling that you're good enough, and feeling that you've got to continually start something, start again on Monday, or all of those things. Kids, you end up thinking that's normal. I was lucky enough to not have that in my life. So when I meet all these women and I see them having all this, I was shocked because I didn't experience that. But I know many of you did, and everybody they have to make comments. People have to make comments, and like I said with Cooper, people always say he's such a big boy, he's got such a big build. They say these things all the time, or they'll say, "Oh, you're such a big boy," and I'm like, why do you have to say that to him? And yeah, people make comments, and it's sometimes those comments are the ones that stick. And why is it so important to get on it now? Because when our kids start dieting, and if they start dieting from a young age, it's setting them up to yo-yo, because they're learning to, they're starting to restrict for a reason that they don't need to. And then they're going to get onto that yo-yo cycle of jumping from diet to diet to diet. The more diets and that have you done, I train people that are 40 and 50 years old that have spent their lifetime dieting. And what we have to do first is we have to get their body used to them eating normally, because they've been so restrictive their whole life. They don't know how to. They might diet for a little while, and then they'll go out and binge, then they'll feel guilty, and then that cycle continues. And that's the thing. If we can, get people to see food as just food, that there's no good or bad. There's stuff that might fuel our bodies better. It might help us with our activities or what we're doing, and focus on how it feels in our bodies, instead of being like, I've seen this latest trend on TikTok, and that's why I need to be only eating cabbage leaves and tomatoes or something, whatever it is. I talk to my kids about dressing their carbs up, and and Cooper laughs because I think just the other night I'd had dinner and everything else, and he was hungry. He was still hungry, and he went and had something, and he think he just had a piece of bread. And I said to him, "Did you dress it up?" And he laughed, and he was like, "No." It was kind of saying you need your protein with your carbs, and I was talking to him about food and how, right, so you're about to go to sleep, but then you're going to eat all these carbohydrates, and that's just going to sit in your stomach. So let's look at, and then sometimes he'll say, "Oh, Mum, I feel really, really full." And it's like, well, maybe let's think about that, and say to Charlie, like my daughter, like, well, when she talks about stuff, well, we need to eat food to feel good and to give us energy and those things, not about food being good or bad, or this is bad food or this is that. Like, yeah, because we just don't want that cycle for them. And don't give food a label. It's food. Food is food, and it's there to fuel our bodies, and it's also there to for enjoyment, and it's just about getting that balance. And it's we don't have to be perfect. It's about having awareness. So you have this awareness, so have this awareness so we can help our kids understand our bodies. I did not understand, until after I had kids, about how my cycle affects my body, and how, how having certain foods can make you weigh more and all of those things. And when I wish, and I teach this to people as straight away, because people get on a diet and they get on the scales and then they think that it's not working. And it is working. It's just that it's taking longer than you think. Or like I was saying, depending on if they've spent years and years yo-yo dieting, we've got to repair that first before your body can kind of trust you to start losing weight. If you are trying to lose weight, we want to set our kids up for success without realizing we can be really influencing them and influencing how they feel about their bodies. And going back to how you were brought up, it's not your fault. It's not your parents' fault or the other people around you. It's just we have more awareness now. And we do need to be more aware, because now more than ever, kids have more access to social media. They have access. There's statistics of, like things happening so much earlier because they have more access and, have more access to social media. So they can see certain things. And I even hear kids say things like, where did they get that from? But we have the opportunity to create change. So at home, how can we support having a more positive body image at home? So we want to talk about strength, not size, and what being strong is. Try to make sure that we ditch the diet talk, especially in front of the kids. They pick up on things, but you can talk about the other reasons. If you were looking to change your food around, it could be about, because I'm feeling really tired and I really want to make sure I have more energy. So I'm just looking at changing my food around. Not I'm going on a diet because I want to lose weight. And think about things like complimenting your child for who they are, not for how they look. Talk about the things that they can do, not how they look. Oh, you look really pretty in that dress, that type of thing. Try not to label food as good or bad. And talk about movement for joy, not as a form of punishment. And it's slowly turning, but I still have lots of people that turn up to my classes and their main goal is about weight loss. And instead of being about movement and, like having muscle is the thing that saves our lives. The more muscle you have, it's your protective layer around skin. So if we talk to the kids around that, but the thing is, we need to start to understand it and believe it ourselves. We need to believe it ourselves so we can be portraying that image to your kids. And talk about, like I would say, like just yesterday, My daughter Charlie had came from soccer training, and we went to dancing, and somehow in the car from soccer training to dancing, she was telling me that she'd had a bad day at school, and some things had happened, blah, blah, and then she didn't want to go into dancing. So she didn't want to go into dancing. And I said to her, like, remember when you dance, how good it makes your body feel, and how it makes you happy, and the things that are stressing you, just go away. And I eventually got her into dance, and then when she finished, she's so happy. When I went to pick her up, she was laughing and she was so happy. And I was like, do you see how when you're feeling a bit sad, but dancing is the thing that makes you happy? And, it's a stress reliever, and, can talk about those things. And the more that we start plugging that stuff into our children from a younger age, that's just the stuff that will follow, because we were brought up thinking that the main reason to exercise was to lose weight, not that we were exercising because it's going to save our lives as we get older. It's going to keep us active and being able to do things and not being in a home. We were just taught that you exercise to lose weight. That's it. So we can have a huge influence on how our kids think about their bodies, and we can be the ones to break this cycle of hating our bodies. People I've trained, and we've put a huge focus on body image, and it's so rewarding to see mums that used to not go in the water. Kids do not care what size you are. They do not care what that tag says on the back. They do care, and they pay attention to you playing with them and you doing things to them. And all they want is to be with you. They don't care if you are a size 8 or a size 16 or a size 26. They do not care. They just care that they have you with them. That's what's important. And I have loved watching mums go from not being confident to be on the beach, not being in the photos with their kids, not doing any of that stuff, to then see them being on the beach with their kids and playing and being in the photos and doing all those things, and it becoming the norm for them instead of hiding, because you are missing out on so much with them. And we really want to break the cycle. And I show you kids that you don't need to sit on the sideline. They don't need to sit on the sideline, and neither do you, and that they can be part of a healthy and happy life, and loving your body for what it can do. It's amazing. I talk about how our bodies, how they react, and how we can, react to different things, and how that it's our, follow our intuition, that it can teach us so much. And they are, our kids are just watching. They are watching how we treat ourselves. And we think we're being discreet with things, but they pick it up and they take it in. And if we want them to speak kindly about, I want you to think in the next week or so, what things do you say about your body? And would you want your child to be saying that about their own body? And if you want it to change, we have to model it, and we have to start modeling it. And even little small changes, the first step is awareness that you're doing it. And that first small change in your language can really plant the seed that can grow into a lifetime of confidence and self-respect for them. So I am challenging you for this week to notice one thing that you say about your body. And I want you to reframe it with kindness. And I want you to say it out loud, the kindness version, and let your child hear it. And this could be one of the most powerful things that you do for your future. And if this is something that you do this week, please let me know. I'd love to hear. So please share us what you've noticed, and if you are able to reframe it with kindness, how we talk about our bodies. So thank you for taking the time to listen to this today, and let's really start to change the cycle and work on how we feel about our bodies, and how our kids feel about their bodies. And if you know anybody that this may help, please share it with them, and let's break the cycle. Okay, bye.